In this session, we would try to gauge India's options and its long-term implications on India's foreign policy. Now, I request Ambassador Prakash to begin. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Nayan. Good evening, all of you, my young friends. I am absolutely delighted to be with you all. Uh, I am also impressed at your the interest that you have in foreign affairs because or international affairs because in today's world, interconnected world, there is implications of what happens outside our borders on India as we play a bigger and bigger role on the international stage. Let me start with a confession. My first posting was Soviet Union. It was I went to Soviet Union in '84, and like you grow fond of first things, first car, first wife, first girlfriend, first. I mean, I'm saying that in the lighter vein, so don't get me wrong. I had a lot of affection for Russia, for the Russian people, and but what I've seen in the last 3 days has led to a dramatic change in my outlook. Let me start with that confession. I never thought that my outlook will change so suddenly, but and I always believed that Russia was more sinned against than sinning, but this is no longer the case. I am convinced that regardless of the reasons, geostrategic, security, political, um, sphere of influence, what have you, Ukraine does not deserve such a fate. And its only fault is that it is on a geopolitical fault line. And it is the price of the location that it is paying. Ukraine very much has the right to choose its destiny. If Ukraine wants to be outside the Soviet ambit, Russian ambit, it has a right. Hitherto, I thought that Russia's has also genuine security concerns, and Russia's concerns were ignored, which is also true. But is this the solution? Is destroying a country for its desire, for its dream, for its desire to become a part of a certain ecosystem, is that the reason for it to get such a severe punishment? I do not believe so. It is a man-made tragedy of epic proportions. Once again, the hubris, the brinkmanship, the short-sightedness, and even a personal angle of politicians has brought the world to such a pass. It's a conflict of choice where the big loser will be Ukraine. Whatever happens, Ukraine will be the biggest loser. And it's a pity that a very cynical game is being played uh, with a convoy, 40-mile convoy, military convoy of Russia moving or closing in on Kiev. They are coming there not to engage in exchange of sweets. The objective is quite sinister. And what is the West doing? Is adding fuel to fire by providing arms, ammunition, intelligence. It's a very cynical game. Uh, that said, Zelensky has become a legend of his lifetime. While he's even in his while he still is in power, 44-year-old person, inexperienced, but that is what his adversity does. Some crumble under adversity. In some cases, the steel comes through. And what a man and what a country, Ukraine. I doff my hat to their valor, their spirit. I don't think that in the, you can see such a phenomena very, very often. My only worry is, or my only point that I've been making on in certain discussions is that there is bravery, which is a positive thing, it's an asset, but then there is bravado, which becomes a liability. I hope that the bravery doesn't translate in transcend into bravado with every good reason. I mean, President Zelensky is an amazing leader, but and I don't have the inputs at my command. Whether there is a hope, even so, even if remote or thin, of managing to push back Russia, if there is that hope, then by all means. If it's only a question of delaying the inevitable, then is it worth paying the price that Ukraine is paying in terms of death and destruction? Uh, President Putin is like a wounded tiger. He's angry. He's he is quite upset, and for him, failure is not an option. The strong man that he is, his entire uh, persona, his USP is to be a tough leader. And I know that Russians like tough leaders because Russia has done very well when there has been a tough leader at the helm. So I don't know whether he would pull back. I don't think he's a person who will pull back. So what will it end up into is absolutely scary. Last point is that for India, it's a nightmarish scenario. For us, it is we are between the rock and the hard place. Uh, we didn't want to offend either, and we will end up offending both sides. That is the dilemma that we are facing. I do not accept the proposition that we are walking the tightrope. We may not have used the words aggression or attack or things, we may not have used that, but we have said it in so many words. When we say that international law has to be abided, that you cannot change the territory and cannot by territorial boundaries by force, that you have to put an end to this bloodshed. I think, and by the way, we have stopped saying that Russia has legitimate security concerns. So if you read what we are saying, I think our position has evolved because there is no way for India to justify or to accept what has been done. Uh, the reason India has been advocating dialogue is that, frankly, we know that there is no other way forward. India's freedom was relatively peaceful, but our independence came along with bloodshed, and we have seen so much of hostility and conflict and strife that we have learned that the only way forward is dialogue. And this could have been easily, not easily, but it could have been resolved by quiet diplomacy, give and take. But no, we are condemned to commit the same mistake again and again and again, and the price is paid by common people. Uh, I do not know how it will shape up. I have a very uncomfortable feeling about the whole thing. And for us, the only lesson is that we cannot depend on anybody. We have to take care of our own security. We are big enough to take decisions in our national interest. Let us be very clear that despite the pressure, despite the criticism, every country takes whatever decision that they take is in their national interest. But for us, what will happen is that the relationship that we have built with Russia, I think, will be damaged considerably. With the US, US attention will shift from the Indo-Pacific to Europe. Quad may not have the kind of attention that Quad deserves. And what is worrisome is the fact, and that's my last comment. What is worrisome is that the West has united to make an example out of Russia, and Russia deserves the punitive actions that is being taken. But they have dropped the ball on China. Why? Because the economic stakes were very high, are very high with China. The economic stakes were not that high with Russia. And again, you see a cynical power game where, and a short sighted power game where you miss the woods for the trees. Let me stop here, and I'll be very happy to get into a discussion. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and comments. I'll appreciate your maybe one of you, maybe Nayan or one of you who are friends may moderate the session.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for your enriching remarks. Now I'll be looking into questions and will read out to you, sir. So the first question is from Arya. She says that how does current geopolitical scenario have an effect on the relationship between India and the rest of the world? Because it is evident that somewhere down the line we need to take side. So what is the situation? What the situation is going to be for India in the near future?
Yeah. The question is from Kavya, right? You said?
Arya, sir.
Avya. Okay. Avya.
Arya, double Arya.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
okay. I don't think that we need to take sides. We have to take our own side. Let us be very clear. We have to do what has to be done in supreme national interest. You know, the rest is packaging. But every country pursues its national interest and does it in a way that it couches it in it or tries to couch it in a way that it is has resonance. Let me give you an example. When the US started the war on terror and entered Afghanistan, there was pressure on India to send its military forces, India's military personnel, to assist the US war on terror. And I'm kind of simplifying it, but putting in context. I mean, I'm not literally getting into the timelines, but it could be 2003, it could be 2002, I don't remember. And what we were told is that the US wants to eliminate terrorism, a terror base. What is terrorism? That is Al Qaeda and Taliban. All right. For that, you need Indian assistance. What about the Pakistani based terror groups? What about Lashkar-e-Taiba? What about Jaish-e-Mohammed? What about the other terrorist tanzeems? No, Russia, no, Pakistan is an ally in the war on terror. Pakistan is helping in the matter. Now, the operatives of Al Qaeda for Islamic State are taken out remotely through drone strikes in all parts of the world. Hafiz Saeed, who has a $10 million bounty on his head, cocks a snook at the world, goes, travels around, moves around. What has happened? He's doing it with impunity. India's security concerns are not important or not that important. India is told to exercise patience. India is told to understand that there is a big picture, and which is the uh, global geopolitics and the need to eliminate Al Qaeda, which is a bigger challenge. So that is how the world operates. Your concerns, if you're a big power, your concerns take precedence over the others. What is CATSA, for example, or what are sanctions, American sanctions? By the way, let me be very clear. I am absolutely supporter of close India-US relations. I think that is going to be the relationship of the future. But at the same time, one has to have one's eyes open. What is CATSA? What are the American sanctions? It is American geostrategic outlook where they take a domestic decision and impose it on other countries. Why do they do that? Because they can. It is very important to understand that countries behave in a certain way because they can. Why does China violate all the international norms? Why is it that can have the gall of saying that never in their history have they been an aggressor while doing precisely the opposite? So all I'm trying to say is that in our real world, there is nothing called equality in relationship. Democracy, human rights, equality are is packaging. It is very easy to talk about it, but then it is the hardcore national interest, and we don't have to be bashful about it. So again, what I'm saying is that we have taken the right decisions. There is going to be a price to pay. Nothing is cost free. As we expand, as we become a bigger power, we'll have to exercise choices. We will commit mistakes. Some choices will go right, some choices will go wrong, but we'll have to exercise choices, and that is what it is. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to take independent decisions. Again, nothing is ever absolutely autonomous. You have to weigh in various things, various factors. There is no cookie cutter approach. It is not that you had taken a certain decision earlier, so you continued doing that. You cannot cite precedents, and that is where diplomacy comes about. It has to be reactive and proactive and nimble, and that is the biggest challenge for India. But we are facing, I think, the biggest challenge since our independence in the turmoil that is taking place in the geopolitics.
Thank you, sir. Now, Pratyaksh has a question. You can unmute and ask.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes. Sir, I have this question wherein, sir, how much do you think that India's massive dependence, army or military dependence upon Russia has had a weight upon India's decision to abstain from the UNSC meeting? And how can we solve that problem?
No decision is taken in vacuum. Certainly you factor in everything. I'll not be honest if I were to say that the quality of India's relationship with Russia did not have a bearing on India's position. Russia is a time-tested friend, was a time-tested friend. Russia stood by us. So, and that is the reason when Russia or Soviet Union entered Afghanistan, we were very unhappy, but we did not publicly criticize them. I know that Mrs. Gandhi weighed in with the Soviet leaders privately, and we took a lot of flack for that. But what has happened this time is cannot be justified by any stretch of imagination, and certainly it will narrow India's diplomatic space. Our relations with Russia will never be the same again. I don't think so. Uh, Russia, for Russia, it will be a long political winter. Um, Russia had never anticipated that the sanctions will be so deep and so punitive. So, and I think they have overplayed their hand. That it has been with hindsight a big folly, because I don't think that they anticipated the kind of resistance. So yes, for us it will be a huge setback. Uh, I think our defense cooperation collaboration with Russia will be severely affected. Our energy, we have invested about $15 billion in the energy sector. That could come under sanctions. Our space program will get affected. Our civil nuclear program will get affected. It is not something that we want, but I don't think that we have a choice. And our dependence on the US will increase, which again is not a very good situation to be in, because US by as a big power is prescriptive, and it will be, I think it's we are entering into a very challenging phase in our relationship with the outside world, and for our own security and our own economy, I think we are going to face considerable difficulties.
Thank you, sir. Now, Shantanu wants to ask a question. Shantanu, you can unmute and ask her.
So, on one hand, we see that NATO is levitating peace by urging Russia to end the war. And at the same time, we see NATO is providing arms support to Ukraine. So, what is this approach which NATO is up to?
Cynical power play, denial of reality, projection of something that is not there. Uh, After the breakup of Soviet Union, Russia was weakened, was disoriented. Russia, as you all know, tried its best to draw closer to the West, and it was treated with disdain. When Putin says that they were played with, that they were trifled with, they were uh, treated with disdain and disrespect, he's right. Till now, I just the other day also, yesterday or day before yesterday, I heard one of the NATO functionaries saying, you know, we wanted to include Ukraine in the NATO, but not to damage the Russian interests. We have nothing against Russia. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think you were there to offer prayers along with Russia. I mean, whom are they deceiving? But that is the double speak that they all engage in. What for on in the name of God, in the name of the Lord, was the justification in trying to squeeze Russia when it is no longer a threat? 1999, 2004, they kept on expanding, and 2008, the Bucharest summit was I think the breaking point. The seeds of today's conflict were sown because of Condoleezza Rice and George Bush at the Bucharest summit in 2000, NATO summit at Bucharest in 2008, when actually the US wanted a formal decision to invite Georgia and Ukraine to join NATO. Angela Merkel and the French president prevailed upon them, said that, look, this will be a very dangerous development. And the compromise was to say that we are opening up the doors to these two countries, which was a red line. Russia remonstrated, nobody bothered. Russia was then weak. Russia, in the last few years, has had accumulated financial clout, economic clout, military muscle, befriended China. In the meantime, the unipolar world order, unipolar period came to an end in 2008 with the economic crisis. US was no longer the power that US was. It is still the preeminent power, but no longer is in a position to shape the world order on its own. What happened in Afghanistan, we know. Then mysteriously, I mean, it is something which is jarring in diplomacy. In politics, you do not have to say things in black and white. There is something called strategic ambiguity. But President Biden kept saying, "We will not commit troops. We have no intention of fighting, getting into a military conflict with Russia, or we will only protect the NATO territory." What did it mean? Why did you have to say that? Russia's realized that, or Putin realized that it is now or never, and he pressed the button. I think, again, in life and in politics, nothing succeeds like success. What is the difference between a terrorist and a revolutionary? They're both terrorists, but a terrorist who succeeds in his objective becomes a revolutionary and becomes the next leader. A terrorist who fails is shot. Again, I'm just talking, being very frank with all of you, so that you understand how politics is. If the invasion of Ukraine had been a short, quick affair, it would have been a different thing. But to see the kind of uh, death and destruction is something that has shocked the world, and the world global opinion has turned against President Putin. So that is how things are, and I'm afraid there are no easy answers to what has happened. But I would again say that it is the cynical attitude of the West that has brought the world to such a pass. Uh, and the gulf that has been created, the will last for a long time. It is going to have very serious economic fallout, and I don't know where it will end. I dread to think of the consequences of how it will shape up.
Thank you, Shantanu. Now we have a question from Mihir.
Good evening, sir. So my question is, sir, after the fall of Russia, if this would be a fall of Russia, would US again become a Western hegemony? Like as we can see currently, Russia also influences in the have a big influence in Europe in different via different means and like gas and oil. Would this mean that US would again become a Western hegemony?
I don't think so. I think that unipolar moment is gone. Today, the world is unipolar militarily because US is still the biggest military power, but China is snapping on its heels. Economically, the world is multipolar, and the biggest beneficiary of this game, this cynical game, is going to be China. And the fact that Russia will be leaning very heavily on China will increase the Chinese clout. I think the democratic forces will be weakened. No, I don't see the US regaining the kind of clout that it has. In fact, the US, in some ways, uh, will be a loser in the bargain, because all this rhetoric about pushing back China will now sound hollow, and China will be encouraged to pursue its activities, which is something that we do not want, the world does not want. But I mean, you do not know what China will do next, whether they will stage a misadventure in Taiwan, whether they will do something in Sea of Japan, how they will behave along the LSE. It is going to be a difficult turn of events.
Okay, sir, thank you. Now we'll take some questions from YouTube. Sarthak Sharma asks, many times India's association with Russia is also suspected of being solely based on strategic gains, and Russian-China ties has been a concern for us. Will China become more troublesome for India?
I've already answered that question. It's a fact that Russia is not no Soviet Union. It's a fact that we have some differences with Russia, and especially when it comes to China. Uh, and Mr. President Putin had himself said that the most important relationship for Russia is China. The kind of deep economic, for us, the challenge is that the content in the relationship between Russia and India is thin. We have a strategic relationship, but it is basically defense, hydrocarbons, nuclear energy, and outer space exploration. The trade is barely $10 billion. The people to people contacts are limited, whereas China Russia relations are galloping. And the trade has crossed $110 billion. They have a $400 billion agreement for supplying of energy over a 40-year period. They have a robust defense cooperation. They are both permanent members of the UN Security Council, etc. And now Russia will have to lean on China even more. So things are going to change quite a lot, and that is what I had mentioned a little while ago. Yeah, Lokesh, Ashish, I'll come to you. Lokesh, if you're there.
Lukesh, you can put up your question in the chat box.
Okay.
Meanwhile,
Sorry. I got into my spokesperson mode. I forgot that you're moderating it. My apologies.
no, sir,
No.
Ashish,
Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Ambassador. Sorry, I joined late. I was taking a test.
No.
So,
Perfectly all right. Perfectly all right. I
okay.
like the lovely pink that you're wearing and supporting on your head, but go ahead.
That's the wall. Okay. So, my question is along these lines that the crisis in Ukraine has sort of, it's causing a huge churning in sort of all strategic groupings around the world, be it NATO, be it the Quad, etc. Right? So, given this and India's stance, like we always support our stance on our neutral stance based on strategic autonomy. So this is increasingly going to be tested, considering that the West won't be very happy with India's votes, India's neutral votes, right? And of course, India needs to vote neutral. I would say, considering the sort of type of relations and the history it has with both Russia and the USA. So the strategic autonomy can increasingly turn into a strategic constraint for India, in my opinion. So I would like to know your opinion, your thoughts on this, and the way forward.
Ashish, I've to a large extent already responded to that, but I'm happy that you talk about strategic autonomy. You know, there is nothing unique or esoteric about strategic autonomy. Every country wants strategic autonomy. Every country. They can call it by whatever name. Uh, the question is whether countries have the ability to exercise strategic autonomy, and that comes with hard power. If you have hard power, you exercise strategic autonomy, otherwise, you talk of strategic autonomy and you cannot. But it does not mean that you don't do what is required. We have been talking of strategic autonomy from the very beginning, but what happened in 1971? We, because it was in our national interest, we signed a treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation with the Soviet Union. And we actually got into a quasi alliance. We never admit it. Why should we admit it? So, strategic autonomy uh, is a position which everybody takes, and you do what you need to do to further your national interests. So, that is what it is. And you can say that I have the strategic autonomy today to uh, be in a position to take a tough stand on Russia because that is not in my national interests. But I have already outlined the fact that the prism through which, you see, it is said that every country's uh, policy or outlook depends on its geographical location. Now, for the US and for the West, Iran is uh, a challenge which has to be contained. For us, we have a civilizational relationship. So can we make our own interests subservient to the interest of another country? But at times you have to, because when sanctions were imposed, we had to stop buying oil. So it is, like you have many balls in the air, and you're dealt with a hand of cards, and you make the best of it. At times you have to make a concession without calling it so. At times you have to engage in an accommodation. At times you have to push ahead. S-400 deal, there was tremendous pressure on India, but we pushed ahead. So again, you have to take, there'll be various options. At times there'll be only bad options, so you pick up the least of the bad options. At times there'll be good options. That is how it is.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Uh, Now we have question from Harsh. Harsh, you
We
can.
will we have 7 more minutes. We'll wind up at
Yes,
6:45. Okay.
yes, sir.
Hmm.
Good evening, sir.
Good
Sir,
evening, Harsh.
my question is more of the the linkages between what is happening in Ukraine and its ramifications globally, and how China looks at it. The way that can China take some lessons from it? That way the Russia has gone about Ukraine, and the way China wants to go about Taiwan. Are there any similarities, or can we see this more as a Western propaganda that is being putting up, that major by major Western editorials, the Atlantic, Foreign Policy, Foreign Affairs, they are saying that there are some designs which are very similar. And so also my other part of this question is that this particular invasion by Russia, they thought that the timeline would be very swift, and within 5 days they would be in Kiev and installing the government that is pro to them. But the Russian weaponry has shown that it has lagged, like in 2008 in Georgia. So are we seeing that the West is again, bringing up the propaganda of its decline and simultaneously acting in its own measures to to let these big autocratic countries act on their will, and then come up with supporting these small nations to downgrade them, like Taiwan and like Ukraine?
Very good question for which there is no answer, only history. When you are 60 years old and I'm gone, you'll get the answer. But, we know that cynical power games are played. It is believed in some quarters, nobody can say it for certainty, that the in 1990, I think, when did Iraq take over Kuwait? I think 89 or 90, right? If I remember it right. But anyway, when that happened, or before that happened, it is believed that the American ambassador or a senior American diplomat who was based in Iraq led Saddam Hussein to believe that, did not say it in so many words, but led him to believe that if he enters Kuwait, the US will look the other way. So, for all you know, it was a setup. But for all you know, it is a Himalayan blunder. It is hubris. But the long and short of it is that we have to understand that in a power game, the smaller countries bear the brunt. This is a power game between the West and Russia. Who pays the price? Ukraine. And as to your other question, uh, Taiwan, yes, China, under Xi Jinping, the mantra that is being given out is great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, and the unfinished agenda is to get back Taiwan. They are watching very carefully. It is believed that China drew the right lessons from Glasnost and Perestroika and the breakup of Soviet Union. Um, Tried to eliminate those mistakes that were committed, and one of the reasons why China cracks down on any contrarian viewpoint is that once you allow the allow a contrarian viewpoint to start gaining currency, you allow liberties, then it acquires its own momentum. Taiwan is no pushover. They have war gamed it. They are armed to their teeth. But you never know. I mean, I don't know whether they can overwhelm the Taiwanese defenses. Russia thought that they could overwhelm the defenses of Ukraine, but they have realized that that is not easy. When China staged the Galwan incident, they thought that they will surprise us. They were in for a surprise. So yes, you plan it, you war game it, but things do not go according to how you're scripted. Uh, there are always surprises, and that is how what reality is. But one thing is very clear, that China will not rest till it does something with Taiwan. Whether they succeed or not is anybody's question, anybody's guess. The saving grace is that just as failure is not an option for Putin, failure is not an option for Xi Jinping. If he were to stage a misadventure against Taiwan and not succeed, his continuation will become problematic. So there are lots of considerations that go into these very cynical games which are played.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much. We would take one more question from
Last question, yeah.
yes, last question. Jayesh,
Yes, first of all, greetings, sir. It was lovely to hear you. Sir, my question is basically, sir, if there comes a situation where Russia has to occupy Ukrainian territory for a certain time being, can there be a Afghanistan-like situation, like a full-blown insurgency, given that the territory, the landscape of Ukraine doesn't support an environment for an insurgency? Can there be a Western-stoked insurgency against Russia that happened in Afghanistan?
It's a very astute question, and you have very rightly given a perspective. I think it will be something that Russia will regret. What they will take over, if they take over, is Ukraine in ruins. The kind of force projection that is taking place is ominous. But one thing that Russia has done is succeeded in fanning the nationalism of Ukraine. Every Ukrainian is today up in arms. The kind of fervor, nationalistic fervor that is visible is unprecedented. There is no, and the hatred for Russia is going to be very high. I don't think that Russia can forcibly occupy, can take over Ukraine. They may, but to retain your Ukraine and to administer Ukraine will be almost impossible. And yes, you're right. West will then intervene, and you will have a situation like Afghanistan, which resulted in the downfall, or one of the main reasons why Soviet Union disintegrated. Thank you very much, guys, ladies, guys. I must say that I am very struck by the kind of questions that have been posed. I hope I've been able to do justice to what you were asking, because I did not want to give you diplomatic answers. As young leaders, you deserve to know or get a perspective. My perspective could be right or wrong, and I must say that I got Russia wrong. I kept on saying that Putin will not attack Ukraine. I was wrong. I did not think that Putin will engage in this kind of wanton destruction of Ukraine. I was wrong. So please take whatever I've said with a ton of salt, but that is my perspective, and I wanted to give you an unvarnished one. Thank you.
thank you so much, sir. And you were amazing, actually. And let's move up with the thank you note, and we can end the session. So I would like to thank Ambassador Prakash on behalf of the Geostrata team that you came here and share your words of wisdom with us. It was our pleasure that we could host you, and we are looking forward to organizing more such events with you, sir.
I'll be very
I
happy
would,
to come back. God bless. Take care. Bye bye.
yes, sir. I would
Thank
also
you.
like to thank our active participants who stayed till the end. Thank you so much. And yes, now you can leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All can leave now.
Please stay tuned. We will be organizing more such events. Bye bye.